Part four, we're going to start with the demo, which hopefully will be interesting to everybody to kind of see a few of the things that we've been talking about over the last 4 weeks. Then we're going to switch gears back to more informational type thing. We're going to go into some advanced topics, give you an example of how we converted some of our trigger business event code, talk about event mapping and how a customer can leverage that to create a new notification, the pillar delivery plans around Notification Composer and some of the differences to know, and then tips and troubleshooting and limitations to be aware of. All right, with that, let's jump over to the demo. All right, I am going to log in, and remember this is a DEP environment, so everybody knows how slow those can be. Oh, I forgot this is being recorded, so hopefully nobody from OCI ever listens to this. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into the notification settings in PeopleTools, just to kind of look at some of the PeopleTools notifications names that we delivered. And you go into notification administration. This has the global settings that we talked about, where you can enable the different delivery methods, configure things about in-app and texting if you're going to use it. And then, of course, notification settings is where the notification names are set up and configured. This allows you to filter. So if you know what you're looking for, you can do things by functional category. These are all kind of organized differently and named differently, of course, across different pillars. The approach HCM took is we tried to look at, okay, well, what are the tiles that we deliver to get to, personal details, or if it's, product related, like, or functionality related, like position management. So we tried to limit the number of notification names so there weren't like too many to choose from, because every notification name that you configure could potentially show up for a user to personalize if the admin allows it. So I'm going to filter on personal details, then you can see all the ones that were delivered mapped to the personal details functional category. So the one I'm going to look at is name, address, contact. So we'll go in here and actually configure and as delivered. So basically this notification name, the way that HCM did this, and I'm just going to use HCM as an example since it's the one I'm familiar with. We actually added, if it doesn't have the word admin or MGR for manager, it means it's for an employee. And so this is basically the notification name for name, address, and contact information that the employee would update in the personal details tile, basically. There's different tiles. This goes to the dashboard. There's a personal details dashboard, and there's tiles to update the name, address, contacts, etc. So this would control everything around the name and address and contact information for the employee and what notifications they receive. So as delivered, and I've already made a change to this, I'm going to change it back. I was trying to make sure the demo was going to work. So as delivered, what HCM did is say, okay, well, employees get an email by default when they get a notification. As delivered, typically we don't make anything mandatory. That's really up to the customer. And we don't really allow personalization. That's a customer choice. And if we actually did allow personalization, basically some of the roles we delivered, they may not have. So as a general rule, typically we do not deliver any of our notification names with allow personalization specified. So for purposes of the demo, I'm actually going to allow personalization and say, anybody with the employee role can actually personalize. And instead, I'm going to make in-app the default and turn off email. It's just easier because we can show notification actually in the application instead of switching over to an email client. So I'm going to press done and then save. All right. So the other thing that I'll do now is I'm going to log in as an employee. and go into my preferences so that this particular user can then choose, since they're allowed to personalize, what they want their delivery method to be. Okay, so basically name, address, contact changes. So basically in-app was the default. And so basically we're all set there. So really remember that unless you can personalize, you saw how many notification names there were. Basically, unless you can personalize, it will not show up for the user unless they have a role or permission based on that setup that we just saw. So basically, this means that if I get a notification related to name, address, or contact details, I'll get an in-app. So I'm going to go into the application and actually make a change to the address. And I guess what I should have done is just to prove that we're actually getting a notification. You'll see on this homepage, no notifications. Okay, just to so everybody knows this now before I actually generate one. There's nothing here now. So I'll go into personal details, go into address, and I'm going to change my home address. Let's say I move from 45 Park Avenue to 50 Park Avenue, and now I'm in apartment 400. So I press save, and you'll see the submit was successful, and it says submitted for approval. So for those not familiar with HCM and HCM self-service, we have approval set up for address changes that go to an administrator when you actually submit a change. Because typically there may be documentation that you have to provide. The payroll administrator has to figure out, okay, do we have, if they're moving to a different state, do they have to do something around their W-4 and the number of dependents they claim, et cetera, et cetera? Do we even have a tax ID for that state? All those things may need to be approved before the employee can actually make the change. So I made this change, and the way that we have this set up in HCM is that when I submit information and it's routed, that basically the admin will get a notification and the employee will get an alert. So you'll see here, submitted address change. Your request was submitted for approval. So this is, generated and it comes to an alert. And that was actually done through Notification Composer. Likewise, if I now log in as the administrator, you'll see a notification that shows up under action. So the way that we've done things, if something is informational, typically it goes to alerts. If it's something that physically has to be actioned, it comes to action. So that's why the employee only got an alert that their approval was, the address change approval was submitted for approval. And then, of course, the administrator has an action that basically it tells them, hey, David Ho submitted something that's awaiting your approval. So you click on the in-app, and I can either say, approve or deny. There's nothing that really changed very much around this overall in PeopleSoft. This is really just hooking into approvals. There were a few changes, at least on the HCM side, that we're not going to cover today, especially when you're dealing with like guided self-service transactions. But in general, nothing really changed overall other than, now approvals is using Notification Composer. And I think we saw some of that in the some of the setup pages we went through with events like a route for approval, deny, pushback, et cetera. Now, instead of those check boxes or notification name, if you were, if it's a financials customer and they implemented notification name, there's now the ability by event, so like route for approval, deny, et cetera, to map that to a notification event in Notification Composer. So I'm going to deny this and say, you did not provide enough proof. You moved to a new address. Let's say I picked a new state, which I didn't in this case, but if I did, and I can say deny. And then, of course, if there is an event in AWE that says, okay, send a notification when you see the deny event, that would actually go to the employee as the submitter. So I can sign out, log back in as David Ho, and address change has been denied. So that really shows you, really quickly the power of Notification Composer once everything is configured. What I do want to drill into a little bit more is some of the Notification Composer specific pages. We've gone into People Tools. We've kind of shown you my preferences. Now, let's say that you're a customer and you want to actually look at what PeopleSoft is actually delivers. So we'll look at a few of the Notification Composer pages. So once the customer has actually created a change package and brought in Notification Composer and all the uptake that the applications have delivered around notifications, they can come and look at everything delivered by PeopleSoft. One of the easiest ways to do this is to look at all the different notification events. This particular page allows you to basically search a whole bunch of different ways. You can look for a specific event if you know the name, or maybe you're looking for something absence related. You could actually basically come in here and say, okay, absence, or something of the sort. If you know the notification ID, if you know the business process, like maybe I want banking, the notification category, is it from Activity Guide Composer? Is it approvals related? Is it the questionnaire framework? Owner ID, if you know the object owner ID. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to actually look for information. Functional category, People Tools notification name. So a lot of capabilities are provided to actually search for and review, update, etc., the information about the notification event. So this is the first time that we really have the ability within the application to see everything related to notifications. So it's a huge improvement over what we had in the past, because previously you had to rely on documentation. Sometimes a lot of the different notifications were never documented. So customers didn't even know about them unless they happened to stumble across them in the code, or were looking in Application Designer, like in Workflow, etc. So some of these things have been hidden for years and customers didn't even know about them. So this improves the overall visibility of notifications in the application. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to switch back. There's a lot of other pages we could go through, but we did go through, I guess, some of those in part 2 and part 3, page by page. So this at least gives you a quick demo of the 2 most important things. Is like reviewing what we deliver as PeopleSoft, and of course, going into my preferences, configuring a notification name, and actually sending and receiving a notification from the application. And we'll cover some of the advanced topics. So the first one is creating custom notifications. So we've talked so far about the ones PeopleSoft delivers, but if a customer wants to create their own, they can now do that through Notification Composer. In the past, if a customer wanted to create a notification, it required coding. Everything required coding. So there are some, if you have simple use cases, it's very easy to create a new notification. If you have some more advanced, like you need conditional logic around whether a notification is sent or not, it still may require some coding, but far less, because you're really just coding the logic. Everything else is setup related. So let's talk about this option. So we went through the guided process to create a new notification and compose notification. And one of the options we didn't cover was event mapping. So basically, event mapping, the event mapping option actually generates a step in the guided process. And you can see that here is that once I select it, it will show up. If it's not selected, it's a way of insulating the person creating that from anything technical, or if they don't need it. So once you select it, it does have the step called define event mapping. Once you do the selection, basically what it's asking you for next is, okay, well, what transaction are we talking about? So basically there's a search field where you can search for a content reference, for lack of a better word, or if you want to think about it as a PeopleSoft transaction. So let's say I was looking for request absence. So I put, request absence, and actually I see absence request. So I could select that. Once you do that, then you actually have the ability to define, well, okay, this is going to happen in absence request. How do I want this triggered? And basically triggered means when you do something in the application, you're going to trigger a notification. That's what that actually means. So the default basically is that if you don't use the advanced options, that it will be done when the transaction is saved. That's the default. If you want to do something a little bit more advanced, you click on the advanced options, and then you have a variety of things that will contribute to how that trigger is generated using event mapping people code. So if save is not the desired method, select advanced options, and then you have a whole bunch of different things that you configure to actually configure the event mapping. You select the event level, whether it's at the component level, record field, or record level. And depending on the event level that you select, you can say, okay, I want this to be in save post-change people code, save pre-change people code, or workflow people code. This kind of dictates the different parameters that event mapping needs to know where and how to actually execute it. Next is the processing sequence. Do I want it before, after, or as an override to the delivered PeopleSoft people code? And of course, depending on the options chosen that I just talked about, the application package to execute in the event mapping people code can be configured. So basically, let's say I said, okay, it's a component event level. I want it on save post change, and the processing sequence is an override. Basically, those feed into how we actually will generate the event mapping people code. And that event mapping people code will actually call the application package that I actually specify here on the setup page. So it's a little technical but if you understand event mapping and people code, this will probably make a lot more sense. We didn't go to a lot of detail today because it's very technical. I know everybody on the call is not necessarily a technical person. There's a lot more information in PeopleBooks about these different options and how they can be used. And if you're not familiar with event mapping, you might want to read up in PeopleBooks about that as well and how it can be used in the application. And really, event mapping, if you haven't heard of it, it is really something delivered quite a bit ago that allows a customer not to change our delivered people code. And so basically, if I say, okay, well, PeopleSoft delivered this, I want to do something a little bit different, you can use event mapping to execute people code before, after, or instead of the delivered people code. Next up, we're going to show you an example of our converted code. So I use trigger business event. This is a very simplistic example. So basically, before notification composer and trigger business event, if you see what's highlighted in red, this was really the only people code that we typically had. It's in workflow people code, and we basically say, trigger business event, and then send it a business process, and then information about the link that, or where the link the user is supposed to navigate to, and different parameters, et cetera, depending on what you're doing. That was what we had previously. And so with the notification composer approach, we basically have really a if then else. So we check to see if notification composer is installed, and if it is, we do something different. We actually call notification composer. Otherwise, we continue to call trigger business event. So that's really the main changes. When we say convert, it's not really converted. It means that it's made notification composer ready. And when notification composer is turned on, it will execute this code instead of the existing code. So we did not rip out all the old code. We basically did this throughout the application. It's really checking to see whether Notification Composer is installed, and then it actually performs a Notification Composer instead of the legacy or older approaches. Okay, let's get on to pillar delivery plans and differences. All right, so I thought it was important to kind of say where and which image Notification Composer uptake was completed in. In many cases, it went over multiple images. So for HCM, our first one was image 47, and it was everything except for federal related notifications. And then in the following image, in 48, we delivered federal approvals, and in 49, we're delivering the non-approval related notifications for federal. So in image 49 will be completely done, but for commercial customers, we were done in image 47, which is the majority of our customers. In FSCM, and we have a couple of individuals online in case there's questions around financials, but financials started with approvals, and they did that in 49. Also in 49, non-approval related notifications like trigger business offense and financials only. And then in the other areas of financials like supply chain, ALM, et cetera, they're still in the planning phases and will be done throughout 2024. In ELM, all but the learning environment-based notifications were in image 23. And in our next image in 2024 with image 24, it'll be everything else. So we'll be done with Notification Composer delivery in image 24. For CRM, we're going to have limited uptake of Notification Composer. And the main reason is that most CRM notifications, other than some of the new approval-related things we delivered in our last image, use AAF, Active Analytics Framework, which still uses trigger business events. So we made the decision that CRM will have limited uptake of Notification Composer, since everything is more driven off of configuring information in Active Analytics Framework. Campus is still evaluating their approach and when they're going to actually deliver it. And the main reason is that they have their own way of doing notifications that uses EOEN, which is Event and Notification Framework. And we're looking at integrating that, with Notification Composer in the future. So right now it's a TBD for campus, but there's conversations going on now about, how to move to Notification Composer. For Interaction Hub and Cloud Manager, there are no plans to adopt Notification Composer. So at least this gives you kind of a bird's eye view of what was delivered when and what the plans are. There's still some plans to be finalized around supply chain and other things in financials, as well as campus. So there are some differences to note for each pillar. So enable by default is one of those where it varies. So as a reminder, enable by default is really saying, okay, which of these delivery methods, in-app, email, or text, will be on by default. So for HCM, employees and managers, the default is email, enabled by default. And for anything administrator related for notifications, in-app. And the reason why that was done is most employees and managers that use PeopleSoft are not in PeopleSoft every single day, especially employees. And whereas the admin is probably in PeopleSoft every single day. So since, if you're not in the application every day and you're only getting things through in-app, you may never see the notification, which is why we actually picked email for employees and managers as the default and in-app for admin, since they are typically in the application every single day. A similar approach was done for ELM. However, email was the initial default in Pi 22. For Pi 23, for admins, we're changing that to be like HCM. So all the admin related will have in-app as enabled by default. FSCM varies. It isn't as clear cut as HCM because they have a variety of different roles like vendors, et cetera. They actually have employees admin. So they're enabled by default, varies by the type of transaction and the role. And CRM email is enabled by default for the approvals that are done in CRM. So that's how things differ across pillars when you're dealing with enabled by default. So in HCM and ELM, we actually delivered a contact preferences synchronization. So in my preferences, the employee a user can actually specify what email they want to receive email notifications from. Well, since we track emails in HCM self-service as well as in ELM, we provided some additional ability to choose which one is utilized in my preferences, using that override that I talked about, I think in part 3 in the People Tools notification settings. And then we also have an AE process that actually sets that default based on the options specified here. So it's really a quick way that, let's say a customer is implementing Notification Composer and wants to sync up everything to the business email in employee self-service. There's a way to do that, or the email that is associated with the user profile. So we deliver an app engine that actually synchronizes all this, that you don't have to necessarily go and have the employees, specify something for something you're going to do across the board for them. Approvals is another area that's a little bit different, especially in FSCM. So FSCM was the only pillar that actually implemented notification name ahead of the notification composer approach. So FSCM has a mix of customers that kept things the old way, not using notification name, and actually did implement notification name. So the conversion becomes really important because there may be some customers that actually are using notification name and want to keep what they actually have configured already. And there's a conversion option for that, like we talked about in the last part. Whereas HCM and ELM, we never really utilize notification name, so it's brand new. So you may have a lot more customers that take the system data or what PeopleSoft delivers as their starting point. But we talked about that in part 3. But just a heads up is that you may get customers that say, hey, I've already implemented all this, or already using notification name. Why am I going to notification composer that gives me notification name? Well, really what it does is it has a standardized approach, and now they can use this framework as you saw in the demo or and other slides that I've talked about. There's a lot more configuration and the ability to create notifications, configure it without customization, and basically centralizes on a standard approach for all notifications. So there are some benefits, but you may hear from customers some complaints. Hey, I've already done this once, and now you're coming back and converting it again. Just something to be aware of. You won't have this in any other pillar but FSCM. HCM provided a navigation collection. So basically, there are a lot of different setup pages that we have that are feature specific or product specific around notifications. You have approvals, you have self-service setup, you have the synchronization process I talked about, notification composer, etc. So we decided, since we had so many different things the customer may need to review, that we provided a navigation collection. At this point, I think HCM is the only pillar that actually delivered a navigation collection, but I think it's being considered in other pillars in the future. Okay, so tips and troubleshooting. The first tip is that there is a plethora of information out on MOS. And actually in the change package that we talked about in part 3, the step actually tells customers, make sure you go to the notification homepage, and gives them this knowledge doc ID number and a link to actually go and review it. The team on the call and the project team actually put a lot of effort to put a lot of information about Notification Composer, how to implement it, known issues, actually included a lot of supplemental information too that's not found in the documentation. So we highly encourage you as well as customers to review all the information there. The implementation tab contains links to other knowledge docs like technical details, the known issues like I talked about. It also contains information about each pillar's implementation about Notification Composer. So if there's some differences like I talked about before, this is the place that customers can come to see information that's very specific about each of the pillars. So you always get the question, well, how do I see what PeopleSoft delivers? So there's actually two different ways. We looked at one of those in the demo, and that's going to review the notification events that PeopleSoft delivers. Everything we deliver has a notification event. So this is the best place to start to look at, what's defined for a particular business process, what's in this particular functional category. I know the notification name, but what's associated to it. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do online and in your database once you've actually applied the change package to the target environment. Another way, if you want to start before you actually apply the change package, is to go to that MOS document that I talked about. In each pillar tab, there's a spreadsheet that has a list or inventory of every single notification that we deliver. And it has all the same fields that you see online. So basically, the name of the event, the name of the business process, the name of the notification name, et cetera. So it's a way for a customer to preview, what they're going to get before they actually apply the change package. So if a customer is not going to use a particular notification, they can disable the notification so it's never sent. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. The easiest way is to go into Compose Notification and change the status to inactive. Even if the code is executing, it will not send the notification if the status is not set to active. Another way is to go into the notification name and the notification settings and turn everything to no. Then that particular notification name and everything associated to it will not be sent. The difference in the two is one is very specific about a notification, but if you do it at the notification name level, it's everything associated to this particular notification name. Remember, the notification name is a grouping, ability to group like notifications together. So if you turn this off, you're basically disabling all the notifications that roll up to this particular grouping. How to change delivered notifications. So we don't really want customers modifying what we deliver. And that always causes problems when you take additional updates from PeopleSoft or trying to troubleshoot, okay, well, what did you change that we delivered? So basically, we took the approach that you have the ability to clone a notification that we deliver. So probably what they would do is once they clone it, make the one that we delivered as inactive. And then what they can do is override the notification event to use the notification ID they cloned. So this actually stores a notification ID in a different table, in a different field than the one we map the event to. So the way this was architected by the developers is a separate table, separate field. So when you do an override, it's not actually customizing. You're configuring it to use a different notification that you cloned or created instead of that for that particular notification event. So for example, if let's say for expense reports, the customer wants to use a different notification name, like maybe, financials delivered, texting turned off, and they don't want to change the delivered notification name. They can create a new notification name, create a new notification ID that hooks up to that notification name they created, and then come in and override the event. So all that is configuration now instead of customization. Confusion in notification administration. I wanted to mention this because a lot of our staff on the development side kind of didn't really follow along when we were doing testing. It's like, okay, well, this page says the main page, which is the one at the top, the notification settings that, the person's going to get an in-app and email. So it's confusing because this page was meant as a summary of what's on the detail page, but the important points are really on the configuration page. So this page is being redesigned due to that confusion in 8.6.2. But if you get a customer that basically is saying, hey, they're not getting the notification I expect, well, there's other things that control that, right? Is that if nothing is enabled by default, maybe they're allowed to personalize. So all those kind of impact whether someone will get a notification or not. So it's really important not to just look at this first page, but use the actions to go in and configure and review the actual detail, because the detail is way more important than this particular summary page. Okay, troubleshooting. We went over in detail about how things are converted, and I mentioned this once, but I want to make sure that I mention it again. Anytime you get a SR about the conversion process and approvals, the first thing you should ask for is, please send me the log, because this will actually tell development, or really you as support engineers, what the option that was chosen by the customer, whether it's mapped to delivered, whether it was preserved, etc. And then also, if you have the installation option turned off, the log will include a message about that as well. So all those are really important for troubleshooting. Also, as well, in the log, it indicates anything that was generated. It'll tell you, okay, for this, this notification ID was created, and it tells you what was created. So this is really important as well to kind of understand, okay, what did we not deliver from PeopleSoft that actually got generated as a result? So that conversion process looks at a mapping table to see what's delivered, see what's in the target, and it maps it correctly. If it doesn't find it in our mapping tables and it knows, oh, well, this is something I don't know anything about, whether it's a new AWE process, whether it's a new event, like maybe we didn't deliver on Escalade and they added that event. You'll see some of those things that are considered custom by the conversion process that will show up here, anything that is generated as a result. Notifications not being received. So we had a lot of this internally when we were doing our testing. So I thought it was important to kind of point out some of the obvious things to look at. So the first thing, of course, always check the installation table to make sure Notification Composer is enabled. Global settings, make sure in-app, email, or if you're using text, that those are enabled. Because if this is disabled, it's a global setting. It doesn't matter how you configure it. If in-app is off, no in-apps will be sent, regardless of what the notification name setup says. Also, speaking of the notification name, check to make sure that the delivery channel is enabled or available, that this is set to yes. Otherwise, you will not get that for any notification that's associated with that particular notification name. Additional things, review the PeopleTools notification name and ensure that if allow personalization is no, that enable by default is set to yes. This is one that will definitely bite customers. So I mentioned that we deliver a system data, some things turned on by default and some things not turned on by default. If a customer changes this and has nothing on by default, and you don't allow personalization, remember, personalization means I can change something about it. If you don't have anything defaulted and the user can't say they want it, then they're not going to get it. So it's something to look at if you get issues raised about, okay, well, nobody's getting this. Well, go to the notification name and check these settings. Also, as well, what makes it even harder is that the admin, if they allow personalization, they're not going to know what the employee has selected. So if I allow personalization and I say, okay, every employee can change this, then, and if it's not mandatory, then I can turn them all off. That means I'm not going to get it, even though it's sent. So those are some things to help in troubleshooting, why a notification is not being received. The last one is review the notification ID. So basically, remember I said when there's different ways to disable, well, this is one of the methods. If this is marked as inactive, of course, the notification will not be sent regardless of what the other pieces I just talked about are set to. More tips. So I put in the top 20 tips. So I've covered some of these, but review the KM docs that we have, download the inventory spreadsheet, and look at on the application specific pillar tabs, because by pillar we have this spreadsheet that has everything we've delivered. Review the delivered notifications and determine which ones you want to utilize, what additional notifications that you're not currently using, and of course any custom. Review the AWE events and determine which conversion approach works best for the organization. Download the PUM source target, connect the source and the target in Change Assistant, select the notification feature plus the application updates and PUM, define and create the change package and apply it. And then once the review step comes that we talked about in part 3, then choose the approach that's right for the organization, whether you're going to map to the delivered or preserve existing. Decide what delivery methods that'll be supported, like in-app, email, text, etc., and configure those in the global settings. Configure the in-app settings. If text message will be used, acquire a Twilio license and configure the text message settings. Determine whether each notification will be mandatory or optional. Identify the recipients. Determine the delivery methods for each notification, and decide whether personalization of notification will be allowed, and if so, which recipients based on roles and permissions are allowed. And if settings for notification name need to be adjusted, create new notification names in the notification settings. And if those are created, then clone the delivered notification ID and compose a notification, associate it to the new notification name, and override the notification event to use the one you cloned. Disable any notifications not being utilized, and of course, test. I mean, there's a lot more, but these are the top 20 things that a customer might want to look at and do. And there's a lot more documented in the MOS knowledge docs that I talked about. Limitations. We'll cover this, and then we'll, in 5 minutes, we'll break and see if there's any questions. So PeopleTools does not currently support CC, so carbon copy and blind carbon copy in email. Therefore, notification composer approach does not either. Customers may have been leveraging this functionality and may think this is a regression. We sort of agree because we know there's use cases, but with the approach with moving to notification composer, remember that we're really just sending a notification. It's up to the configuration and potentially personalization to choose the delivery method. So, CC and BCC is very specific to email. Now the recipient may have the ability to say, oh, I want a text. Well, CC and BCC don't really work for text. Neither does in-app, right? There's no such thing as a CC or BCC on a text or an in-app. So those are not applicable to the overall direction that we're going with notifications. So you may hear this from customers. One of the asks that we have asked PeopleTools for is to provide the CC and BCC when email is being used, and the customer has to understand this will be ignored if the employee does not receive, if the recipient does not receive an email. They're looking at that for a future PeopleTools release. Bind variables that we talked about in part 2, I believe, cannot be easily added to the delivered notifications without customization. The reason is a lot of that is embedded in the code. We're looking at a longer-term approach to this, because we've already gotten some feedback from development and from some customers. But for now, anything delivered, you really can't add your own bind variables and have the delivered notifications recognize that and resolve it. Custom notifications using event mapping are limited. We went through some of those, but the other thing is if that's not what they want to do, or maybe they want conditional logic, there's additional configuration you can do to do it a different way and actually code your conditions in an app package. So let's say you wanted to send a notification, but only under these particular situations, that's still going to require a developer. There's no way for the application to know or understand, what your conditions are. So that still will require a developer. We're looking at that longer term as well, how to have more of a framework that allows, someone that's maybe not very technical to help define some of the conditional logic, basically either through a query or through some other kind of configuration page. But right now, conditional sending of a notification still requires a developer. Notification Composer does not integrate with EOEN, so the Event and Notification Framework. This is really considered a replacement for that. And that's one of the reasons why Campus has not implemented this yet, but we're looking at how to merge the two together longer term. Active Analytics Framework uses trigger business events. This is something used in, we use it in HCM, we use it in CRM. It sends notifications as well. And since it's trigger business event based, right now we are not converting anything that uses AAF to Notification Composer. Many notifications override the message content and recipients at runtime and may not utilize what is set up in Notification Composer. This may make it difficult for customers to understand, hey, I want to change this message text. Where do I go to do it? Because I go into the notification ID and it says custom text. I don't know where that's coming from. We're looking at a longer term solution for that to help document, in the notification ID where it's coming from. But for now, that might be confusing to some customers. So those are the limitations to be aware of. Also, text messages which have links that are long may not be operable if the message content is split over multiple text messages. So some vendors, and I can't remember, it used to be Sprint, and I can't remember who it is now. So basically, if you had like a really long link and it just happened to divide the text message up over multiples because it goes over the maximum they allow, if that link is in the middle of it, it basically means part of your link is in text and part is in the other. So we've tried to limit, where we actually include links and text messages. And currently, PeopleTools does not support tiny URL. So this may cause some issues for customers. You might get a question about, okay, well, this is all about outbound. What about inbound? For now, PeopleTools has limited support for inbound, but we have not adopted that or decided to use it yet in Notification Composer. So for now, Notification Composer does no inbound at all. It's more outbound. Final notes. So once the application pillars deliver Notification Composer, new features we deliver from that point forward, which trigger notifications, will only use the Notification Composer approach. This is to help incent customers to move to Notification Composer because of the next bullet point. Our current plan is that all the legacy approaches to notifications will be desupported December 31st of 2025. So it gives customers 2 years. We're still looking at that D support date, but that's the thinking right now. Is a lot of this was delivered in 2023, not everything, but at this point we're saying December 31st, 2025 is when you just start using Notification Composer.